What is your sex ed horror story? I was filling in for the 9th grade life skills teacher while she was at an appointment, and she left a chart for the kids to fill in with different birth control methods, their percent effectiveness, any side effects. I'm at the front of the room leading the discussion with the info they need to fill in their charts. The last method on the chart was abstinence. I said there are no side effects. One of the freshman boys raised his hand and said, I know a side effect of abstinence, carpal tunnel. I couldn't even pretend that it was inappropriate. I laughed as hard as the kids did. Okay, that's hilarious. We did a thing in 9th grade where anyone could write down a question anonymously. One was about average penis size. This was in the early 90s, so that wasn't something we could just Google. The sex ed teacher, who was highly trained at coaching football but probably not at sex ed, told us between 7 and 9 inches. Probably every guy nervously glanced around the room and tried to put in their sure, that sounds about right face. I was convinced for about a year that I had a micropenis. This is a great one. I remember as a kid watching the TV show Friends or something similar when a character said 12 inches was average. Felt the same way for years. Split us up into boys and girls, with the girls going off into another room for instruction. Then 2 teachers screamed at us for what must have been 20 minutes that if anyone laughed or made a joke we would be suspended. Nice intro, thanks. There was a kid in class who raised his hand and asked, what's it called when girls spray out that liquid during sex? The teacher responded, girls don't do that. He said, trust me, it's real. I've seen it a bunch of times in videos. She never responded. That was 6th grade. 5th grade, they separated the boys and girls into 2 classrooms. They must have thought the boys were too young to need any sex ed. Late 1980s. So we were read a short story, Ray Bradbury's A Sound of Thunder, where they go back in time to kill a dinosaur by the school principal, a man. In the classroom with the girls, they papered over all the windows and had a teacher standing guard outside. The girls must have gotten the straight truth from our cranky female teacher about how they were all about to have their periods, get boobs, grow pubes, needing deodorant for body odor, everything. This was probably the first time men had heard some of this stuff. Because when the boys came back into the room, all the girls were shell-shocked. Some were crying. I asked the girl who sat next to me, what story did your class read? Best story here. The punchline at the end killed me. In 6th grade, I had honest to God never heard the word masturbate before in my life. The teacher was explaining stuff, or maybe it was a video about safe sex or abstinence. I can't recall which, but the word came up and nothing explained what it meant. I asked what is masturbation and an awkward silence fell over everything. Maybe because the teacher, a man, thought I was joking or trying to be funny. He slowly realized I was serious and then struggled so hard to explain it appropriately. It's when, you do things to feel good with yourself. You touch things and I felt terrible for asking. To this day, I don't know who was more embarrassed, me, the teacher, or everyone else. I was in high school in the 80s. For some reason, they must have really wanted us to learn sex ed, because it was taught to us in home economics, social studies, gym, and science. My home ec teacher chose to have us all take turns reading the textbook aloud. There was a boy in our class who was terribly shy on a normal day. Reading aloud from any textbook gave him anxiety, but on that day, the paragraph that fell to him was all about female genitalia. You could see his face turn purple the closer his time to read came. He could barely articulate, but he asked to go to the bathroom and was denied. The teacher made him read the paragraph anyway. He did, but he shook and trembled so much that not a one of us even thought of making fun of him. It was so painful to watch. Then, the teacher said, that wasn't loud enough. Read it again. We all sat in stunned silence. He tried to say no. He pleaded. She persisted. He did read it again, through tears and clenched teeth. She then released him to go to the bathroom, and he bolted. I don't think he came back that day, and I think he learned more about human nature than sex ed. Poor fella. A teacher asked the class, who can name a part of the male reproductive anatomy? In this one kind answered with full confidence, a vagina. I knew a girl freshman year of college who thought that men had vaginas, or some type of hole. Her reasoning was that she'd heard about men getting prostate exams and didn't know what else they would check. One kid in my class asked if you could get STDs from having sex with a chicken. Kind of put him on the spot and was a little suspicious. Someone link that country boys make do picture please. Not really a horror story. In high school, sex ed, our teacher had a big section on condoms, which culminated with the class betting on how stretchy they were to prove that no one should accept the "I'm too big for them" excuse. Well, one air pump and one condom later, we had our answer at about the size of a long watermelon. As our teacher was going to try to pop it, to prove they tough, our principal was doing his rounds and opened the door, saw our teacher smacking the crap out of an inflated condom and just backed away slowly. I found it hilarious. Principal: "Hey, I need the." Teacher: violently smacking inflated condom. 9th grade sex ed. Teacher got a wooden penis to show how to put on a condom and the condom ripped in front of everyone. And our teacher said, "In my 27 years of living, I have never seen a condom rip," and someone in the back of class said, "Dang, teacher be getting hella B," and he legit laughed nervously. This isn't too much of a horror story but more of a moment that made me queasy. First, when discussing testicular cancer, they showed us a video of this skinny ginger guy in the shower feeling up his balls to check for tumors. Then they gave us this fake nutsack to pass around and feel. It was pretty lifelike and you could squeeze the balls and they'd kind of pop slide around the sack. All I could think of was doing that to my own sack and it just made me feel uneasy. The whole experience was just awful. We watched a video that tried to be hip and cool about sex ed and puberty. Direct quote: "During puberty, a woman's hips and breasts grow. Insert poorly done animation of a girl's hips and breasts enlarging to ridiculous sizes. No, not that big." Probably 9 or 10 years old, mid 1980s. Sex ed was taught at an after school event that lasted about a week. My mom and I and my best friend and her mom went. There were 2 rooms, girls and their moms in one room and boys and their dads in the next room over. We learned basic stuff mostly about anatomy. Slides were shown, probably dating from the 1950s. Awkward. Then at one point, the male teacher came over and asked for a few of the moms to come next door to help with something. My imagination went wild, especially since my mom went with the man. I thought for sure that she and the other mom who went were being forced to show a live demo of what their boobs looked like, or worse, even though I didn't know what worse was yet. They were in there for what seemed forever. What were they doing to our moms? How is my mom going to explain this to my dad when we get home? Why is nobody alarmed? Because they were moving desks. Well, I didn't think it was a horror story, but it stunned a few people. When I was 5 and my sister was 6, we had a fish tank. One of the fish we had was a pregnant molly we liked quite a bit. Unfortunately, she died before giving birth. So my sister, curious creature she is, asked our aunt, a trauma nurse who worked on Life Flight with a passion for teaching, if we could cut open the fish and save the babies. This would eventually lead first to my aunt dissecting the fish for us, then to her explaining reproduction, and ended with a rudimentary version of the talk. My aunt would take every chance she got to have a very graphic and factual discussion about sex and reproduction, so we would always be armed with knowledge and never have anything unknown. But it was in hindsight a bizarre way to get educated on the birds and the bees. That's a very nurse thing to do. My friend's mom bought a sexual reproductive pop-up book. It covered both male and female. So you would open it up and the uterus and fallopian tubes would pop up at your face. You can only imagine the fun we had with that. Is that an open sex ed pop-up book in your pants, or are you happy to see me? We played STD in a cup. Everyone gets a cup of water. One cup of water has a bunch of dissolved starch in it, the STD. We went around swapping fluids to represent sex, and we're supposed to see if we could safely avoid STDs without protection. Swapping fluids. At the end, we find out who had the STD by dropping iodine into each cup, turning the starch blue. If it turned blue, you tested positive. Everyone in the class ended up with the STD, even me, because even though I only had one partner, and they had only had one before me, the one before them was a sleut and had everybody's fluids. Honestly, a very good exercise and warning. Except for that one kid. At the end, he dumped his test results and refilled his cup at the bubbler in order to claim he didn't have the STD, and he was good for more fluid swapping. Honestly, another good lesson on buttholes who will lie about being clean. Use protection, kids. That's actually a good way to teach that, haha. 6th grade sex ed. At the end of the class, the teacher opened the floor for questions. She said we could ask anything as long as it was a serious question. The only question I remember is when a kid, male, asked, "It's okay to have sex with your sister, right?" The teacher stared at him for what felt like a minute and said no. Being singled out by the teacher because I had a unique name for a scenario along with a boy who I didn't like. She used our names in a scenario talking about how a relationship develops. We had to stand in front of the class while she described random scenarios where we might end up having unprotected sex, and why it was bad. I was not attracted to this boy, and I'm sure he wasn't attracted to me either. Hearing her talking about us having sex was nightmarish. That's ridiculously inappropriate. You can say person A and person B, not hey, you kids. Let's talk about how y'all would bang. My sex ed teacher brought a kid up to the front of the classroom wearing a shirt that had 2 long sleeves and explained what an uncircumcised penis looked like. To be fair, that would have helped immensely when I was in middle high school. It was taught by a Jesuit monk whose English language skills were Latin, and by the end, 1 hour class total, I sometimes couldn't even identify which sex the diagrams were showing. It was all line diagrams, all medical terms. Father Bitoli thought it went well. Anyway, I'm reminded of the drawing in the sand scene from the movie Morris. Here is the vagina, and here the membrum virilis, says the teacher. Morris, looking on dubiously, I don't think I shall ever marry. In 6th grade I learned the term popping your cherry from some friends in sex ed class. I went home with this newly found knowledge and accused my older sister of having her cherry popped. She broke out in tears and my mom grounded me for a week. More of a lack of sex ed horror story, and thankfully short. A guy who I had a crush on, both of us seniors, pulled me aside one day and asks, "So when a girl has her period she just lays an egg in the toilet, right?" I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I answered him or just stared at him. In my school sex ed was co-ed until gender specific issues came up. So when it came time to learn how to self-check for cancers we split into groups. When we were sent away to watch a film on testicular cancer, I said, "Alright fellas, let's watch the ball game," and got detention. I still think it was a grade A joke. It is. 9th grade health with Mr. Lamb. Dude was an absolute gem of a human being, but his voice sounded exactly like Barry White, like all the time. So anytime he tried to say anything remotely sexual, it sounded like the voiceover for a raunchy R&B song, which made the freshmen erupt in laughter constantly. Poor guy just couldn't get through a lesson for 3 straight weeks. SENSURLLERN. Mine was basically, if you have sex you're gonna get diseases, get pregnant and die. I was scared to have sex for a long time. Yeah, I don't get why they scare students into not having sex. It's not a bad thing. Well, it can be. It depends. A horror story in terms of education. In grade 9, we were given a paper that had an equation that said having safe, protected sex was equal to Satan. It went. Condoms and birth control led to premarital sex and sex without the intention of procreation. Premarital sex and sex without the intent to have children is a sin. Choosing to be sinful is the job of Satan. Condoms equals Satan. Needless to say, we had a lot of pregnant girls in our graduating year. People dim to realize just how bad crap goes when the teachers' authorities put some religious bulls and false info into sex ed. And it's sad. In elementary school, the boys in my class watched this generic boys puberty education video as normal. Also as normal, it touched on the male genitals and erections. After the whole thing ended, we then asked the teacher questions about anything in the video, and I crap you not, I decided to ask, when you get an erection, is there a bone that goes into the penis? My sex ed was a series of books on cassette tapes from some Christian organization my dad made me listen to in the car with him one awkward summer day. Suffice to say, my actual sexual education came courtesy of one insanely understanding young lady from the Craigslist dating section. Our first night together she just said, "Wow, you really have no idea what's up, do you?" and proceeded to walk me through crap for a few hours. Honestly, hats off to that woman. because there's no way I was good at anything, but she invited me over a few more times after that, and even though we never so much as actually dated, I still regard her with a massively fond respect. The only thing I remember from sex ed which was taught by the creepy lunch lady. Lunch lady unrolls a condom and stretches it as far as she could. Then she says, "I know none of you are this big, so this will fit any of you." Unintentional sex ed happened for me in 4th grade. In an assignment we had to invent a new town relating to the gold rush. I named it KP, and I thought I just made a new word. Did not know what P was. My imagination sucks and the town name was similar to a name I recently heard, Cape Horn. We had to give a reason for the name and my unimaginative mind said they didn't know why. A teacher-parent conference later I was confused why they were asking me about the word P and if I knew what it meant. Zero explanation on their end. So curiosity hits me and I Google P. That's how my 4th grade teacher introduced me to online pornography and wanking. At first I read this as unintentional sex happened for me in 4th grade, and I was trying to figure out how a school assignment could have that twist. Catholic middle school. In 8th grade they made us watch a video that was basically don't have sex or you'll die. The woman speaking in the video literally said she could tell if a girl has had sex or not by looking into her eyes and gazing into her spirit. Aside from basic biology and anatomy, that was the only formal sex ed that I received in school. That's horrifying. If you touch each other, you will get chlamydia and die. My health teacher in high school told us condoms are strong and they are very stretchy. Don't believe any guy who goes, "I'm too big. It won't fit all this or it's just gonna break anyways. Why bother putting one on?" She then produced 3 condoms available for pickup in the health office. Proceeded to pull one over her hand and up past her elbow on her arm like it was a fancy costume glove. Spread her fingers out as wide as they can go. Stretched 2 remaining of said condoms over her cowboy boots. And walked around non-stop for over 6 hours before one of them broke. Not necessarily a horror story, but that crap will haunt my dreams forever, Mayo. Yeah, I saw video by the slow-mo guys on YouTube about opening one in a wind tunnel. It was surreal to watch. Story from my mom. She taught a middle school special ed class. Her and a male colleague handled sex ed. Her first year on the job, they passed around a box so that students could write questions anonymously. The male teacher pulled a question and said he couldn't answer. Mom, wanting to be helpful, asked if it was a female question. The male teacher tried to warn her. The question was, "What does CM taste like?" My mom was so dedicated to educating these kids that she launched into a hypothetical discussion about how most body fluids have a high salt content, so it might taste salty. The boy who wrote the question could not contain himself and blurted, "My girlfriend said it tastes like gummy bears. My mother never ate a gummy bear again. It doesn't taste like gummy bears." 2 interns were teaching us, 7th grade, about HIV. Interns. So, you can catch it by oral, vaginal and anal sex. That guy in the back, what about nasal sex? Everybody, shut up. Diego. Interns. Well, the worst that could happen is dying by asphyxiation. Upvote if Hitler's a pretty good guy. 6th grade sex ed class. I was pretty sheltered and did not get internet until I was 18, so I was pretty in the dark compared to most kids my age. The teacher said it's totally normal to masturbate. I was sitting next to this kid and whispered, "What does that mean?" He full well knew what it meant, but he's like, "IDK, you should ask." My dumb butt raised my hand and straight up asked what masturbation was, and everyone started laughing so hard at me. To get the attention off of me, the kid next to me pointed to some poor kid in my class and was like, "Look, he's doing it right now." I was like, "What's he doing?" Class got pretty out of control. I still went home that day and had no clue what it meant. That kid who was sitting next to you was a true friend. A friend of mine almost started puking during sex ed when we were watching a movie about childbirth in class. It wasn't very explicit, but the blood was enough to get him as pale as the wall. Poor dude. I was in health class and there was this kid named Jordan. Jordan was dumb as frick. Our gym teacher toughed our sex ed class. He was a no balls kinda guy and he dealt with his fare of balls from Jordan. He does the classic "there are no stupid questions here" spiel. Well, Jordan, after hearing this, raises his hand with full enthusiasm. He goes, "Mister, Gee, sometimes if I squeeze my nipples really hard, like I mean really hard, a tiny drop of milk will come out. Is this normal? Our gym teacher just sort of looked at him in disbelief, but Jordan was full on serious. Our gym teacher goes, you know when I said there are no stupid questions? Well, I was wrong. Stop squeezing your nipples, Jordan. In case anyone reading this is curious, no, that isn't really normal. Don't squeeze your nipples that hard, and if you start producing even small amounts of milk and you aren't a pregnant or recently pregnant person, you should see a doctor for some tests. My ex's roommate in Bible college was part of a group that traveled for skits and sang songs to schools and youth groups about abstinence. She was asked to sit out when her baby bump started to show. She swore she had never done it. Her boyfriend swore as well, and he was a virgin. Turns out she let her previous boyfriend do things. So she and her old boyfriend got a shotgun wedding before their kid was born. She was lecturing kids and had no idea what sex was. She was told babies come from semen, so she just thought sailors, seaman, were part of the process. Mayo, that reminds me of the one Bob's Burgers episode where Tina's telling a story about seamen, but not really a horror story, rather a hilarious one. Catholic school sex ed, and they break up girls and guys into 2 rooms, a nun teaching the girls and a priest teaching the boys. Honestly, probably more informative than my friends who went to public school. Taught about abstinence as well as condoms and whatnot. Anyways, the priest talks to us about masturbation, and I'll never forget his line. Masturbation is perfectly normal. In fact, 95% of men admit to doing it one time or the other. The other 5% are liars. If you get the chance to read through the old Puritan diaries, it's discussed at some length depending on author. Just in case you wanted to know how much Cotton Mather loved jerking off as a teenager. Having a chastity seminar by Jason Avert and hearing him brag about how girls would tell him that he changed their life and would rip off their Playboy bunny necklaces. I'll take bulls. That never happened for 400 Jack. Oh man, here we go. Sex ed junior year of high school. One of the days I was sick, like really sick. So instead of going to class, I went to the nurse because I felt like I was gonna puke. Nurse told me that I had to get a pass from the teacher of the class I'm about to go to and come back, which was stupid. So I was like, frick that nurse, I'll just go to class if they won't help me feel better. So I'm in class, and it's of course the day of the STD slideshow where they show us the most extreme untreated pictures of STDs to try and scare us into not wanting to have sex. Surprised they were even allowed to show it in our conservative community. So there I sit, crammed in with a bunch of other students, since they combined 2 health classes at once for this. I'm nowhere near the door, and I feel it. I am going to puke. Frick, I don't want to puke in front of everyone, especially during the STD slideshow. I try to power through it. Nope, not working. I let out a series of super loud retches, but to my surprise, I don't actually puke. I did it. Now I am merely the kid who dry heaved during the STD slideshow, not the one that puked all over the floor and other students. Still was embarrassing as heck though. I feel like the sound effects only enhanced the experience for everyone else. Good job. Teachers couldn't have asked for better. My sex ed teacher, a short frizzy haired shrill woman, would tell us all about her own sex life in class. Oh yeah, got to hear about her husband bending her over the stair railing and giving it to her, or about that time on the kitchen table, or that time on the living room floor where she got rug burn. There were a few others, but yeah. Holy crap, that's so inappropriate. I didn't know what sex was at the time it was taught, but apparently, my whole class knew. So when it was being taught, I couldn't understand it and asked a lot of inquiries. Then I started to notice that my class was starting to stare. Teacher passed out candy, then explained that the candy was our abstinence, and once you eat the candy you don't have it anymore, blah blah blah, conservative don't have sex crap. The point is, my friend and I got sent to the office for moaning loudly while eating M&Ms. That is amazing. Thank you for this entertainment. Not a horror story but a funny one. We had sex ed in 10th grade, for some freaking reason, and a classmate of mine was barely paying attention. Someone asked why you can't pee and ejaculate at the same time, and my teacher explained, and this guy just goes, wait, I can pee while I have a boner. Am I a medical marvel? I have not let him forget it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.